Avez-vous compris? And not only do we have Amélie Nothomb, qu'est-ce que c'est? In that delightful schoolgirl pose, you know, but we also have her here in a beautiful Gothic reality to read the poem, and joining her in our seats here to the right, this will be, I'll give you the center mic in a second, but I'm very jealous. I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely, Emily, I'm very pleased to have you here. I wish that I had another hat for you, perhaps. I was thinking of something with stars and stripes, or perhaps the Lady Liberty crown, but that couldn't be arranged at short notice. And to translate her poem in 2 different versions, I've gone for a kind of Lolita theme this year with older men and younger women. Occupying the lower end of the range, we have the lovely Jolie Hale here to translate, please. And I have to say, Italian is a much more generous language than English with regard to ages, because you are always young. And so the ever young Richard Sieburth. Everyone keeps asking me how this works. I'm not quite sure how it does myself, but I can give you a little bit of the ordine del giorno. Emily will read the poem, followed by the translations. We will project the poems as they are read, and we will look at all 3 together. So, everyone, a warm welcome to Amélie Nothomb.
Oh, it's the very first time I read this text, so it makes strange. L'appel de la succube. Toi, au fond de la nuit, tu ne dors. Au fond de la nuit, tu t'agites et tu cries. Au fond de la nuit, tu as peur. Au fond de ton cœur, tu sais bien que c'est moi qui t'appelle, qui te veut, qui te prend, qui t'adore, qui te hait, qui t'en veut, qui rouvre ta blessure. Toi, il y a si longtemps, ton sang était le mien. Il y a si longtemps, tu m'appartenais pour l'éternité. Il y a si longtemps, tu te donnais à moi. Il y a si longtemps, tu disais m'aimer pour l'éternité. Toi, tu as porté mon deuil un temps. Puis, il a fallu que la vie continue. Mais au fond de toi, tu as peur, car tu sais que tu ne m'as pas survécu. Tu m'appelles, tu me veux, tu me prends, tu m'adores, tu me hais, tu m'en veux, tu rouvres ma blessure. Toi, jusqu'à l'infini, ton sang sera le mien. Jusqu'à l'infini, tu m'appartiendras pour l'éternité. Jusqu'à l'infini, je te boirai la vie. Jusqu'à l'infini, je te posséderai pour l'éternité. Jusqu'à l'infini, je te boirai la vie. Jusqu'à l'infini, je te posséderai pour l'éternité.
Jolie, tu es prête? You can do it at the center microphone if you prefer, or do you prefer to sit? Oh, central microphone, come on, yes. Give her some encouragement.
All right. Are we ready?
Wait.
Okay. Call of the succubus. You, in the deep of night, you do not rest. In the deep of night, you tremble and cry. In the deep of night, you know fear. Deep in your heart, you know who I am. The one who calls you, who wants you, who takes you, who worships you, who loathes you. The one you want, the one who opens your wound. You, so long ago your blood was mine. So long ago you belonged to me for eternity. So long ago you surrendered. So long ago you said you loved me for eternity. You who bore my passion once, then went on with life. Deep in your heart you fear that you did not escape. You call me, you want me, you take me. You worship me, you loathe me. You want me, you open my wound. You, unto infinity your blood will be mine. Unto infinity you will belong to me for eternity. Unto infinity I will drink your life. Unto infinity I will have you for eternity. Unto infinity I will drink your life. Unto infinity I will possess you for eternity.
Monsieur Sieburth.
I've been watching Treme of late, and I decided I would transpose this into the idiom of Dr. John, Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen, the demon lover who comes at night. So it's called succubus. Hey, lover. Deep in the night, you can't sleep. Deep in the night, you toss and you scream. Deep in the night, you're so afraid. Deep in your heart, you know it's me. Calling you, wanting you, taking you, loving you, hating you, resenting you, opening up all your old wounds. Hey, lover, deep in the past, your blood was mine. Deep in the past, you belonged to me for eternity. Deep in the past, you gave yourself to me. Deep in the past, you said you'd love me for eternity. Hey, lover, you went through the motions of grief, then life went on its way. But deep inside, you're so afraid, you know you never survived me. Calling me, wanting me, taking me, loving me, hating me, resenting me, opening up all my old wounds. Hey, lover, your blood will be mine to the end of time. To the end of time, you'll belong to me for eternity. To the end of time, I'll drink up your life. To the end of time, I'll possess you for eternity. To the end of time, I'll drink up your life. To the end of time, I'll possess you for eternity.
I should let you all know that when Richard agreed, blindfolded, to do this, he was very worried that we were going to show the spelling up on the screen. And everyone always asks, what is a translation slam? And now you can see. Amélie, of course, your first impressions.
Well, I loved it, but what is incredible is the difference between the first version you see sung by French singer Robert, and your interpretation. It's exactly the same spirit, but it's totally the opposite, and it works. That's just wonderful.
Well, we're connecting Belgium and New Orleans.
Wow, this is wonderful. But it's exactly the New Orleans spirit, as it is, of course, the dead body calling back the lover, saying, hey, you thought you survived me, but it's not true. You didn't survive. I'm still with you.
Yeah.
Jolie, you, of course, had the experience of, you went on first.
I did. This isn't going to work. All right.
Yeah. Yes, and I had no idea what to expect from Richard, so that was fun. Yeah, I was from the beginning completely obsessed by the title, about the word succubus, and that's what I was thinking of the whole time I was translating, was this mythical, some would say biblical creature, and so I went for that eeriness of the succubus. I find it a terrifying idea, and also, frankly, Robert's kind of eerie herself. At least in the video that I got from Michael originally, it was a different one, and it was
I couldn't
the
find
quality
that one.
of her
I couldn't
voice.
find that one again on YouTube. You know. I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I could have sent it to you. It was ghostly the way she sang it in that
yes,
one.
but I wrote this text for her because she's exactly that kind. She could be the succubus.
Yes. So I was trying to inhabit the voice of the succubus.
Your translation was extremely close, and I appreciate it a lot, of course.
I think there were a few lines where I took some liberties, but overall, yes, quite close.
Check the airflow.
I think,
What is
I
that?
think,
Check the airflow.
Yes.
but I mean, I think we could also translate check the airflow in a million different directions. But
But I think we will all become succubus tonight. It will be the right spirit for
a
it.
question, is the succubus necessary? I mean, if I recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the succubus is necessarily a woman.
Incubus is the male and succubus is the
Yeah.
female.
The incubus is the male counterpart.
But they do the same thing.
Yes. You know. Just try. Be an incubus. Please just try.
But no, I mean, I know many incubi actually. I don't have a lot of familiarity with the succubi of the species, you know, but, you know.
We will introduce you maybe to some succubi.
No. Richard, you're smiling.
I am.
What's running through your mind?
Je m'en canaille.
Yes, I mean, I could only think of a French adjective when you were reading, you know, chanteur manqué. I mean, you know, I almost wish that we had maybe not a guitarist. I'm not sure what would be the appropriate music. I mean, this was Dr.
Oh yes, Dr. John
so,
would be
you know.
perfect. Absolutely. But only voice was excellent. You have a tremendous voice.
Are you speaking to me or to him? Lean back here.
Both of you, of course.
Nice save.
No, but it's sort of, I mean, in recent years I keep hearing all these talk about gender translation, and I really think it's a lot of bullshit because, yeah, you agree. Oh, thank you.
Including for French to French, you know, I have even this song creates so many reactions because some people say, but it's not la succube, it's le succube. So what's the point of it?
just tell
Everybody
people,
understands.
yeah, gender is a question of grammar. That's it, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
it.
So-
Yes.
And looking at the way you guys, well, I guess if we want to sort of look for, let's look at the differences, yes? Well, Jolie,
Where
since
are
you went
they?
first. Yeah, none. What struck you right away as he read it beside this deep, baritonal, you know, seductive, but now we've learned incubal voice, yeah?
Yes. I'm curious as to why you chose not to contract your verbs. Because you were, you know, wanting me, taking me.
Can you hear in the back?
Why were the G's left on in the written version?
Well, that's an interesting, when you look at transcriptions of song lyrics, whether you keep the ing or you put in the apostrophe over the end. Yeah, I think this is a score for whoever's accent takes it where it went. I did a simulacrum of what I hear as a New Orleans accent, but I love the English ing possibilities, which I noticed you went for.
I went for clauses.
You went for clauses, and I think participial English, or gerundive English, all that ing is just absolutely great.
But you're right, it's a great liberty of English because in French, the participe présent de gerundive, you have to avoid it. It's not good, but in English, it's absolutely excellent.
Absolutely, and it's a kind of an atemporal verb form that just gives you process, right? So that was the main thing. I mean, actually in the translation, the thing that I keyed into is the au fond de la nuit and au fond de toi, and I wanted to go to depth, and that's why I went, instead of il y a longtemps, I went deep in the past. So it's the deep that runs through here. Deep in the night, deep in the night, deep in the past, deep in your heart, and so that was the key for me to kind of structure this through, so that's, as opposed to going to il y a si longtemps, which in English, what did you do?
So long ago.
So long ago. No, I wanted to run depth here. I wanted to run a kind of a resurgence of something out of depth. In other words, to turn time into space.
And Jolie, also in terms of like your general thinking about the poem, could you talk about it?
Yes, I think Richard went for liberties of form and grammar, and I think that my liberties were taken with diction. Particularly, you who bore my passion once. I think literally it would say something like, you carried my grief, or you carried my pain. And I tied that idea of grief and pain and suffering into the vaguely biblical idea of pain and suffering, so I chose the word passion.
Yes, I mean, I think I like that you use the adjective biblical too when you talk about worship, for example.
Right. Yeah. That happened a lot in my word choices.
Was that
I was going for the myth of the succubus.
A personal thing, or was it?
If you're asking if I'm religious, the answer is an emphatic no.
I was thinking
the
more
mythology is certainly fascinating.
I was thinking more in romantic terms, actually.
Romantic terms.
I mean, because I don't think that we can never I mean, personally, when I translate sex scenes, I find it dreadfully embarrassing. It's like I'm 10 years old at the movies and watching people kiss and covering my eyes. And so I have to translate with my eyes closed. You know?
Oh, yeah, my favorite line to translate was, "You opened my wound." I was like, I can't wait to read that.
So, I mean, I think that we have to overcome either we have to indulge our inhibitions or be free of them. And when we translate in a way, and it really comes out strongly when you're dealing with an intimate poem like this, I think. I don't want to get into your business, but
you're gonna have to stop dancing around it if you want me to know what you're asking. Come on.
Bring it on, right?
Yeah, but in terms of this line, tu as porté mon deuil un temps. Puis il a fallu que la vie continue. So you go to you who bore my passion once, and I wanted you who went through the motions of grief.
That changes the ownership of the grief.
And it talks about this is a very, very sarcastic comment on the part of the demon lover, who is commenting on just having played out a kind of a superficial deuil, a superficial mourning. Puis il a fallu que la vie continue. You know, we were closer there, then went on with life, then life went on its way, right? So there we're close. But for me, that was actually the little other punctum here is to the notion of going through merely the motions of grief. And you have that as bore my passions once, but actually the poem is about mourning and a kind of denial of the genuineness of the mourning of the beloved, who is, because it's kind of an incomplete mourning, that sets up the situation of haunting, right?
That's exactly it.
The attempt at mourning that is not completed, or the feigned mourning. I think I didn't feel any attitude of superficiality or feigned
but you know,
in here. I'm not saying it's not there, but I didn't.
But it is a poem about deuil and mourning, and the failure of genuine mourning that actually creates the possibility of what in the trade is called hauntology, not ontology, but hauntology. You know, that creates the possibility of this ghosting, right?
I don't know if you can imagine how wonderful for me it is to listen to both of you describing your feeling about the text and the translation, and I'm there thinking all that about my little text. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, people from the audience, I'd be very eager to hear some of the thoughts or the questions that any of, since actually you can all look at the text without craning your necks, maybe some of you might have some thoughts? Please. And I don't know if we have a traveling mic, or I'll just use this. If you could come up to the front.
It's more a question.
She doesn't need a mic.
Yeah. Jolie here in the back.
How a poet would feel if someone takes his or her work and then builds upon it, somehow adding another cultural dimension that wasn't in the original. I suppose different poets would have different reactions. I myself find Ms. Jolie's translation much closer to the original, and if I were the poet, I think I would prefer that someone had stuck closer to my work, but perhaps there's something to be said for taking a work and doing other things with it. When you look at translations of the Rubaiyat, for example, 19th century, what was it, Edward, I can't think of the name.
Fitzgerald.
Who did a wonderful translation of the Rubaiyat, but apparently added a great deal of himself to it. And
What's wrong with that?
No, I'm not saying that it was wrong, but what I'm saying is that it's just a reflection and a question of where is the responsibility of the translator in trying to be as close as possible to the original.
You know, first of all, I have to tell that my text is not the Rubaiyat. So if you cheat with it, it's from no importance at all. But
you haven't seen the footnotes yet.
But believe me, it's not a way to make everybody happy. I love both translations. Of course, being narcissistic as author, I'm very pleased with the one of Miss Jolie because it's very close to mine. So, and I think, well, it matches also in English to be close to my text. But I am also so pleased with the one with the hat man because.
Hat man. The hat man.
No. Because, of course, it's very different.
That's nice coming from Hat Woman, yes.
Because it's like, you know, it's like meeting my grandchild. It's not exactly my child, it's the child of my child. It's, you're my grandchild.
Can I comment a little on your question, adding oneself to the poem? I think maybe it was easier for me not to feel any need to do that because, okay, let's face it, I am a young woman and I'm very self-conscious about the fact that my sexual power is probably my primary power at this point in my life, which is something that I absolutely hate. So, but it was easy for
Richard,
me
let's
to
go hide in the back.
It was easy for me to stick with the ideas that I perceived in the poem of sexual power and control, power exchanges, and female sexual power. I didn't need to stray from it in order to feel that I was being true to my own voice as I translated. And that's just your luck.
Please.
You know, it makes me think also of the difference between interpretation and translation. And not just in poetry, but also in music or, I mean, if you think of Glenn Gould interpreting Bach, but also if you think of something a little more popular, and though it didn't go into a different language, Bob Dylan, when he wrote All Along the Watchtower, and then Hendrix comes along and does this amazing interpretation, which is very, very different from what Dylan did with an acoustic guitar. And then he later says, Hendrix found things in there that I didn't even know were in there. And he loved it. So, you know, for somebody to take a Bach or a Beethoven piece and play it in their own way and to make changes and embody it is kind of a succubal kind of thing too, you know.
Of course, what a gift!
So,
what a gift for me. Of course, I'm. Thank you so much to both of you, and I love when you tell "Hey lover" because it's so American and it works. It works. It matches with the meaning of the text. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I actually went on YouTube and watched the performance. I frankly do not know the œuvre of Robert, but I heard
what?
I heard, for me, a French tradition. I hear a little bit of Jane Birkin in her.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
I hear a little bit of sort of a French inflection of Björk, and this is sort of a certain kind of French chanson, and so, you know, the cultural translation is how to turn this into the American song tradition. And so keying off the succubus and taking it back down to a kind of Dr. John Marie Laveau, Voodoo Queen, Demon Lover, New Orleans, that was the decision, is how to do a cultural translation in that direction and to arrive with something that is at least a, you know, a potentially credible kind of song that might have emerged out of that tradition. So it's really the decisions about how to translate the words are then determined by the larger decision to translate this into an American song tradition, you know, because we do not have Jane Birkin and,
no, I know.
and we do not have Björk, and but we
I would
have.
disagree. I think we do have Björk.
Do we? Okay.
I live in Queens. We have Björk in
We have
Queens.
Björk.
Very much have Björk.
Jolie, yeah.
But I mean, if we want to go into our tradition of the figure of sort of the haunting demon lover, I think we have to go down to New Orleans, you know, which is obviously also a very interesting place of an interference between a Creole culture for an interference between English and French, right?
Wonderful. Our next meeting will be in New Orleans, and yes.
Fantastic proposal. Very good, everyone. Thank you very much. This is very great. I don't have a gong here, and I don't have any prizes, but I do have a lovely poet who has arrived to be with us tonight from Lahore in Pakistan, and I am so happy that after 4 years, we're doing a language that Microsoft Word cannot deal with. Urdu, the great poetic language of the world, really. I mean, as you get into those areas, you suddenly realize that we talk about East and West in a very silly way. And here to dispel all of those divisions is Famida Riaz, who will be translated by Adeeba. Are you here? Talukder. Adeeba, very good. And Waqas, I'm hoping, are you here? Fantastic. So please, everyone come. How do you do? Come to the stage. How do you do? This is, you will be, you can read from the center. You will be last. How do you do, please? Would you like to stand and read, or would you prefer to sit?
Yeah, I can stand and read.
Shall we stand and give her a good hand? She just got off the plane. And we have to, I think the translation slam, I think, is a very good cure for jet lag. So.
So the title of my poem is Zabano ka bosa. Zabano ke ras mein ye kaisi mehak hai. Ye bosa कि जिससे मोहब्बत की सहबा की उठती है खुशबू, ये बदमस्त खुशबू जो गहरा गुनूदा नशा ला रही है। ये कैसा नशा है मेरे जहन के रेज़े रेज़े में एक आँख सी खुल गई है। तुम अपनी ज़बां मेरे मुंह में रखे जैसे पाताल से मेरी जान खींचते हो। ये भीगा हुआ गर्म व तारीक बोसा अमावस की काली बरसती हुई रात जैसे उमड़ती चली आ रही है। कहीं कोई साथ अज़ल से रमीदा मेरी रूह के दश्त में उड़ रही थी, वो साथ कहीं तर चली आ रही है। मुझे ऐसा लगता है तारीकियों के लरसते हुए पुल को मैं पार करती चली जा रही हूँ। ये पुल ख़त्म होने को है और अब इसके आगे कहीं रोशनी है।
Before hearing the translations, just a quick question. When was the last time you read that poem in public?
Well, many, many years ago, and the reaction was so bad at that time in Pakistan that I really stopped reading these poems. But then I must inform everybody that because of the women's movement in Pakistan, and because they have now taken up women's literature also, it has become much easier. And actually I was so delighted and surprised to see that a dancer, Shima Kirmani, is actually performing dances on this poem.
Now let us hear the kind of dance that Adeeba Talukder is going to come up with. And again, just a little background on the translation slam. We give the poets as little time as possible. Obviously, you cannot, well, obviously, I mean, maybe some people do. The idea of an extemporaneous translation would be a bit much to ask, but I try to give them as little time as possible without having a nervous breakdown. And they were very generous in coming to our assistance in this. Adeeba.
Tongue's kiss. How fragrant the nectar of tongues. This kiss, musk of love's red wine, spreads a deep, slow intoxication. And what an intoxication! It is as though in my mind's every fragment an eye has blinked awake. You place your tongue in my mouth, pull my life from the nether world. This kiss, wet, warm, dark, night of the new moon, black, raining, spills, spills. From my soul's wilderness, the accursed pre-eternal hour draws close, closer. And I feel I am walking darkness, its wavering bridge soon to end. Beyond it, somewhere, there is light.
Waqas?
Okay. The translation that I sent you is not the one that I'm reading.
That's okay.
Okay.
Just don't expect us to start typing in the changes.
No, not at all. Here it is. What a wonderful translation, really. First of all, I have to appreciate that. Mine is here, tongue kissing. What is this fragrance in the nectar of tongues? This kiss from which arises the draught of love's red wine. This delirious scent that brings with it a tranquilizing drowsiness. What ecstasy is this? An eye awakens in every particle of my brain. Placing your tongue in my mouth, you draw, as if from the underworld, my life. This wet, warm, inchoate kiss. As if Amavas, black, pouring night of the invisible new moon, comes sweeping over. Somewhere, some ripe moment, older than eternity, floating in my soul's wasteland, approaches ever so near. It seems to me I am passing endlessly across a shuddering bridge of darknesses. This bridge is about to end, and beyond it, somewhere, is light. Thank you.
I don't know who was smoking what before the poem or the translation was written, but please, Famida, your first response.
Well, the two languages have very different traditions, right? English is really very different from Urdu. I have done a lot of translation myself, but mostly from Persian or from other Pakistani languages. So when you see such as the rainy season, and now in English it sounds, the rain again, it's such a different thing from what it means in India, right? In India, everybody loves the rain and the scent of the earth, because it has been so parched and so scorched by the sun over the long summers that we have there. So poetry also has, or other words, the connotations of words have roots in the land and the air and the seasons of that place. So that is something still, I would say, whatever I tried to write in that poem has been very well conveyed or captured by both these translators, I should say. And thank you, and here is for your translation.
So, Adeeba, in hearing the poem read, and in hearing her voice and reading it, does that confirm you, or what impression does that have on you?
I think that line breaks wise. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
It's good.
Okay.
Is it good?
Yeah. Okay. Line breaks wise, I think I understood better some of the decisions that had been made. And I think one of the phrases I had a bit of trouble with was "Kahin koi saat azal se ramida," which I translated as the accursed pre-eternal hour.
Mm-hmm.
And
can you repeat that?
The Urdu?
No, your translation.
The accursed pre-eternal hour.
The
accursed?
Accursed. Why accursed? No, Ramida doesn't mean that. Ramida means which has run away, escaped, and running away, constantly running away.
I used Platts.
A movement which has a runaway movement, something like that.
Yeah.
Azal says since eternity.
Well, you could say 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah. So Ramida, don't you have dictionaries, Urdu dictionaries here?
I actually used Platts, and the translation they had for that was terrified, alarmed, scared, horror-struck, disturbed, or afflicted.
No,
and I couldn't find any other.
Which dictionary have you been
I
using?
honestly asked a lot of people.
Oh, yes, you did. No, but it's not surprising. But I'm sure that some universities must have Urdu dictionaries also, right?
No, but actually, you would be very surprised at how bad dictionaries are. I mean, in my own experience, I'm finding that, first of all, if we sort of try to put Urdu into some context, for example, Adeeba, what is your relationship to Urdu?
So I was born in Pakistan, but I moved here when I was about 8 months with my parents, and spoke Urdu until I was about 5, at which point English sort of replaced it as my as a language I spoke in. And then after that, I think I rediscovered it in towards the beginning of college. So I'm not as well acquainted with it as I'd like to be. But,
I guess one of the reasons I ask, I was friends with the late poet Shahid Ali,
right.
and he translated from Urdu, but he himself did not speak it. He sat down next to his mother, who translated the Urdu into English, and then he did so much work to sort of, I don't want to use the verb popularize, but certainly to make the ghazal better known and to encourage people to start experimenting with this type of verse.
So I guess in response to your original question, what I was trying to say was that upon reading or hear that, I realized just how wrong my translation was.
But no, please. Which is why when you said accursed and the woman has run away.
Not the woman, the moment.
The moment.
Oh, the
has run
moment.
The
Oh,
moment
sorry.
has run away.
Someone like
Well, women do run away in Pakistan pretty often. They have to. But in this poem, it was the moment. Saat. Saat means just one, a moment, a second, a minute, something like that. Can be translated like that.
Oh, Waqas, please take this lovely translator off the front burner.
Well, yes, first of all,
now it's your turn, and please be just as critical of him.
Yes.
And I'm not saying this patronizingly. She has a sense of rhythm. She has a sense of the sensibility of the poet. Yes, there may be some words that may not be accurately translated, but there is a lot that is very promising in that translation. So I say that straight off the bat. I actually admired the way she had opened the poem and then moved on with it. She's capturing a certain rhythm from the poem, and very few people who perhaps translate but don't have a sense of the original language are able to capture that kind of a thing. So this is a great.
Well, I found actually it's very interesting in translation classes or something. Some people can come up with the most beautiful and appropriate and solutions or versions without. It's not always about lots of knowledge, Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there are two words in that poem which are virtually impossible to translate into English. One is Betal, and the other one Patal, and the other one is Amavas. Amavis. The trouble with both these words is well, Amavas. It's pronounced pronounced in different ways, but Amavas and Patal. The trouble with these words is that they are like the words Hades, for instance. It has a whole history behind it. There's a whole, sensibility that goes into understanding or responding to that kind of a word. So these words relate. One of them relates to the seasons and the cultural aspect. The other relates to, let's say, the demonology or the whole idea of, the worlds within words. But that's where we get the word underworld, for instance, on the one hand. Airflow, too much of it.
Because you see, underworld these days in English, I think underworld belongs to criminals, really. Does it?
No. The underworld, as it is represented, is the world where the the condemned or perhaps the dead go.
Yes. In Greek mythology, you have a place for which there is a word.
But Betal also has this connotation that there are demons. It also has this in that world, deep down. It's the world beneath the world, in other words. And when you talk about that, you're talking, in fact, about also the id, in a way. Yeah. In Freudian terms, this is that part of our consciousness that has these untrammeled thoughts and emotions, all muddied and sort of. And so that's where this thing is coming from. And to give that effect, instead of technicalizing it, if I can use that word, by id or by or exoticizing it some way, you use the word that seems to be the most understated but gives the effect. And underworld is the word that that I used for that. And the Amavas, for instance, I use the word Amavas because I thought it is important to retain perhaps the original word itself here, to give the sense of the alienation of sensibility here, because it's a different word, it's a different culture. And then what we have after that, parenthetically, black pouring rain of the night of the invisible new moon. So it is the night of the invisible new moon that we are talking of. So it kind of explains that.
Amavas is the darkest night.
The darkest night.
Moonless.
But you can't see the moon. The new moon is there, but it is not visible.
Yes.
And I found this fascinating in your poem because that invisible new moon in the darkest night actually is connected so beautifully at the end when you're passing the bridge or crossing over the bridge in its darknesses, that there is light at the end
somewhere
of that bridge.
Beyond,
so that's that little light, but you still, you don't see it, you don't get to it.
Moving away from technicalities, I think in our correspondence, you had said something very interesting about the origins of the poem that I did not share with you, because, I mean, we really are trying to be fresh in our approaches to these. Could you please talk to us about that just a little bit, what you said about Robert Frost? Yeah.
So people used to ask me, why did you choose to write about the kiss of tongues? In Urdu, the title of the poem is Zabano Ka Bosa, which means Zaban is tongues, a kiss of tongues. So actually, why did I write about it? Well, I could have written about it without any reason also, because I felt like it. But, but the real reason was actually, it's many, many years ago, I had read an interview of Robert Frost in an English literary journal. And in that he was describing many kinds of kisses. And in that he had written about the kiss of tongues. And he likened that to a Greek wood lock, a lock of wood. So when I read it, I said, oh my God, no, this is, well, not exactly that way. A kiss of tongues, a kiss cannot be likened only to a lock of wood, of all the things. So I began to write this poem, perhaps to one day send it to Robert Frost. This is what a kiss of tongues is really like, not a Greek woodlock.
Yes, yes. Do you wish you had known this before, Adeeba?
Wait, that was a question, right?
Yeah. It's never a question, but
No. I mean, no, not to be offensive or anything, but I just liked the fact that I'd never seen the poem before and I knew nothing about it, and I had to, I guess, create my own meaning from whatever was on the page and nothing else.
I should add, for those of you who are wondering about our technical difficulties, apparently the projector got too heated up.
Oh, with this conversation?
Exactly, yes. Deep kisses in 3 languages, yes. I mean in 2 languages, in 3 versions. The same question to you, Waqas?
What was the question?
Oh. She said it wasn't a question, but I'll place it as a... Would it have helped to know what she just said now before translating the poem?
Not really. I mean, it still enlarges my understanding of the poem when I hear about it, but it wouldn't really have helped. The poem is there independently doing its function. It's performing its function. And I think that's what every writer hopes the poem to do. If you need a writer at the shoulder of every reader telling him or her what this poem is about, then that writer has not done her or his job properly. So really, that wouldn't have helped.
Because it was interesting. Waqas, incidentally, is the editor of the anthology of modern Pakistani poetry that has just come out from the Dalkey archives. And we were corresponding looking for a young Urdu translator. And voila, I realized...
found an old. Your luck.
And when I asked him the obvious question, why don't you be the young Urdu translator? Before saying yes or no, he sent me the translation like in the space of a couple of hours, I think, yeah? I mean, you're a fast man, or?
Well, I was doing stuff at demand. I was hot on demand at that point, I should say, because people were asking me to contribute to a blog here and to a little, thing that they wanted to do there, and it was in the middle of something. And I said, might as well do this translation as well and get it over with. But then I thought about it, and I said, well, what I sent him, I wish I could recall it, because, I've had second thoughts, and I think that this could be fine-tuned. So I ended up having 3 or 4 versions of it, and finally a version that I'm more comfortable with, which is the one that I read out here. Translation is an impossible job. I keep on saying this, and I've said it so many
the word
times.
that you played with was, am I correct, intoxicated?
Yes.
Interesting. And you replaced it with?
This, well...
Can I have a drink, please?
This intoxicated scent which brings with it a tranquilizing drowsiness, this delirious scent.
Yeah.
And I think that delirious may be closer to the feeling that the poem seemed to communicate to me. And I make no claims about this being the general feeling that everyone would have had. Because when you are kissing in the way that is described in the poem, it is a feeling of delirium that you're talking about. It's like intoxication that has brought you to that state of almost ecstasy. You know, that's where it comes from. So I thought delirious was a more appropriate word here than intoxicated. Mm-hmm. Intoxicated had other connotations which perhaps don't quite apply here.
For instance, I write, your gehra, gunuda. Gehra is deep. Mm-hmm. Gunuda is sleepy.
Drowsy.
Right? Sleepy.
Yeah.
Nasha. Nasha is nasha la rahi hai. And nasha is, of course, what is the feeling you get after drinking. How do you describe it? Is it drunkenness? No.
Wasted.
What exactly is a word in English for it? Mm-hmm. After you have drunk, say, a peg too many, one glass too many.
You mean that night or the next day?
No. For that you don't need to drink at all. The kiss has its own drink in it, inbuilt. No, so there is a word for it, nasha. In Urdu, we understand what it means. It is the result of drinking, right? But it's a pleasant feeling. Not a delirium exactly. I don't know, to my mind the connotations of delirium are horrifying.
Well, it's not delirium mentis. I mean, it's a different thing that we're talking of here.
Yeah.
It's the word delirious is when you're also in a state of ecstasy, when you're very happy. So that's one thing. The other thing is something that I'd like to relate.
Means sleepiness as well as, you know,
well, actually,
intoxication.
Let's look at
I don't know the word.
But if someone calls you delirious, you know, in New York today, it's not quite that.
Okay, let's look at the original.
Like if I were to argue with now, I'd just say you're delirious. You know, you're crazy.
Well, right. Delirious, like many other words, or all other words in the English language, has many meanings and many connotations.
No, but
and we must understand.
The reason I bring
the context determines the meaning. And just a few minutes ago, we were having a little conversation outside, and Famida mentioned that, I'd like to have a couple of drinks before I sleep because I want to have a peaceful sleep. Notice the word tranquilizing in this line. I am using Famida's own language.
But I was also thinking, though, in terms of what a word means in America today, in contemporary standard American English. And the language that you've both used actually is, I don't want to say Victorian, but it is, well, yeah.
And I would again go back to, perhaps I talked to you over the phone, I don't know, I didn't perhaps.
We're meeting today for the first time.
Or somebody.
So, yeah.
When I said that a lot of Pakistani poetry, when translated, appears very Victorian.
Yeah.
And there is a certain sensibility there which is closer to the Victorian times or age than it is to what we call modern here. There's a misunderstanding, for instance, with the title of the book that we have, Modern Poetry from Pakistan, as if the word modern is used in the modernistic sense as we use it today in the West. But what is modern in South Asia, including India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, is very different from what is considered modern here. So our own receptivities are bound by the kind of nurturing and education we have had in the culture that we belong to.
But I'd just like to hear from Adeeba a second, because you're really getting crowded out here.
Yes.
I mean, please.
Response to the fact that they're Victorian.
Take it where you want.
There's such large gaps between question and like the time that I have to answer that.
That's what we call a modern sensibility, I think.
No, but I really don't think, Waqas, that there is so great a difference between what the West considers modern today and what people in, say, subcontinent, the Indo-Pak subcontinent consider modern. There isn't so great a difference between that. The only difficulty lies in words and their associations, what lies behind the word, because there's a whole history behind every word, right? In what context it has been used in the past. So that is where, and that's where I think that if you capture that, so it's not then it is not impossible to translate it into English. And I think this can be done. Although the fact is that I haven't attempted translating anything from English into Urdu, for instance, but it's not impossible because it's a small world today. It's not as if what is considered to be modern, I mean, what is modern in the West, right? Poems about, say, homosexuality. Well, many centuries ago, people in Persian and Urdu were writing about homosexuality. They were writing poems about homosexuality, idolizing it. And what else? Sex? Well, some of the greatest books about sex, treating it in depth, were written in these parts of the world. So it's not what is considered modern today. Basically, I think that the basic human values are equally shared by people in the Indo-Pak subcontinent as well as in the West. But language is really to understand it. One has to understand the words and get to know, really work on language, I think. That is the only hurdle. Otherwise, in Germany, there is an association called Lyric Line. I mean, they have given it an English name. They translate, and you can access it online if you go on Lyric Line. They've also translated my poems and the poems of Haris Khalik. They had invited us to Berlin, which is where they are located. So they are translating a lot of poems from Eastern countries. Well, we divide it like this, like East and West, non-European countries into German and, of course, English, because more than half the world, I should say, is really English speaking, more familiar with English than other European languages. So English is important. And they are doing it, must be doing it pretty well, because I understand Persian and I read the translations of Persian, which were very, very close, and they just got the spirit of it.
Speaking of the spirit, Adeeba, I'll give you a real question, okay?
Okay.
And getting to the text, a really interesting divide between what the two of you are doing. This line, well, two lines actually. You place your tongue in my mouth, pull my life from the netherworld. Whereas Waqas, you write, placing your tongue in my mouth, you draw as if from the nether regions my life. And then this kiss, wet, warm, dark, yes, literally true. I mean, I can't, they're close, right? I mean, I can't read Urdu. But taking it in very different directions and with a very different sensibility, I think. Yeah.
So as Waqas mentioned, the word patal is actually very difficult to translate, and one of the things I try to do when I translate, and I don't know whether it's right, it's just what I'm inclined to do, is if I hear consonants in the original, then I try to reproduce it with, obviously not the same sounds, but I try to reproduce it in the translation. And so I kept wanting to say inferno, and it just didn't fit in just because it didn't sound too right with the rest of the words. And the reason I chose Netherworld was because it fit better in that sense. So that was really my decision. It was just how it sounded.
You're being a remarkably quiet and nice audience. I'm wondering if you have questions. Yeah. Oh, wow. Someone new, please. If you have a good loud voice.
I do.
Okay.
I like seeing the three translations. Waqas had an earlier draft, and then he read a later draft. And I'm wondering, during the translation process with new versions, is it because you hear the music differently, you see the different sensibility, you have a different understanding of the meaning? What is it that leads to these sometimes dramatic changes from draft to draft?
Oh, actually, an excellent question, and I would say all three, because you've identified all three features or factors that go into this. Reading the poem over and over again, you seem to actually get, with every reading, perhaps a different lyricism as well, a different sense of lyricism as well. Reading it again and again, you also begin to see, okay, this is the work it is doing in its original language, but I may have gone for the most, let's say, mathematically exact word that might fit here, but that is not quite the connotation that is being given by that word. So, in other words, you have to find something that goes beyond that. Now, in the original, if you were to translate it, and in fact, Adeeba has translated it quite accurately when she talks about the kiss as wet, warm, and dark. These are the words that are used in the original poem, and I translate it as this wet, warm, inchoate kiss. That inchoate idea comes from where? From that dark, from the word dark in the original. And that original, actually, that idea is not conveyed simply by the word, dark, the accurate translation, let us say, or the precise translation of that, but has to be somehow supplemented with this, this adjective as it is. And this is what I discovered, that when I was reading it, there were things that would crop up that would force me to find, other words. And while I'm saying this, I'm also very cognizant of the fact that the way Famida, you described for a moment a few minutes ago, this idea of modern sensibility, there is one important distinction that we need to keep in mind. What is modern for the Western world is not thematic, and it's not the subject. It is the fragmented sensibility, and it is the way, it is the style, it is the way it is said in language. And you mentioned language, when you concluded with that comment of yours. So that language of modernity, I'm afraid, is not yet generalized in the languages that we are talking of in Pakistan. And Urdu is also very much part of it. There are some writers who are writing in that modernist sensibility. Now, this poem would not fall into that category simply because the subject would be shocking in Pakistan or would be new in Pakistan. It doesn't mean, therefore, it is modern in that sense. So that's something to be kept in mind as well, that I do not do violence to the original idiom of the poem by extending it or stretching it so far that it becomes a different sensibility entirely. It becomes a sensibility which is not quite present in the style of the poet. That conscious awareness of the fragmentation of language, even that's not there in the original.
Adeeba, does the adjective modern get you as worked up?
Also, I don't know if both of you, if Adeeba, you noticed that what I was trying to do was the tense that I was using, अमावस की काली बरसती हुई रात जैसे उमड़ती चली आ रही है. So it's a continuity, right? How would you say it in English? उमड़ती चली आ रही है.
So it keeps on welling, is that it?
Yes.
Umati chali aa rahi hai, that would be the literal translation.
It is a present continuous tense, right?
Right.
It is a present continuous tense that I use in 2 or 3 lines, one after another,
right,
which I did deliberately because I wanted to put emphasis on the process.
I'm going to give you a ruler so you can just smack them.
But that wouldn't translate very well into English because that would create, a quaintness that would alienate readers as well. So it has to be harnessed in some way.
Yes.
Again, in Adeeba's defense here, but she can defend herself.
I guess
a question in the way back, I think. Sorry, please.
No, I was just saying I tried doing it that way because I saw the deliberateness and I really wanted to stick to it. And then I didn't see it flowing as well in English as it does in Urdu. So.
Which is a big question, always, I mean, you can look at the Urdu as long as you want, but is the English working?
Yeah.
And people cook up theories and teach and talk about translation, but, it's like they say, but how does it taste, did the cake rise? I mean, you follow the recipe, but, I saw a question in the back. Yes. Could you? And that, how are we doing for time?
Hi, Famida. This is Mina. Hi. I have a question for Famida about her own translations. Some years ago, as you know, you translated one of my own poems into Urdu. And we had this amazing conversation by email where you talked about what the word passion might mean and what I might mean by it. And I suddenly understood something from you which I had not understood earlier as a poet in my own work, which is that one has to dig underneath the roots of language and place underneath syntax in order to make a poem, So I was wondering if in your own work as a poet, you feel that in writing an Urdu poem, you're digging underneath into a place where there are no words, as if even in actually composing the poem, you are translating from some zone without words.
But we are very familiar with our own mother tongues, with our own language. We don't give it, it happens without your thinking about it. The words you choose, your entire mind and, I should say, your thinking is working for it, for you, without, it happens effortlessly, more or less, when you're writing in your own language. Right? But what somebody else means, especially, you see, there are so many other problems. For instance, people whose first tongue is not English, they are writing in English. So how do we understand them? Do we understand their usage of words as we take it? Or do we understand it differently? Are they giving their personal, individual connotations to words also, right? Like Mina's first tongue, I believe, may not be English, right? Huh?
Malayalam.
It's Malayalam, right? Which is again a language different from Urdu, right? It's from in the south of India. They speak Malayalam. Urdu is from north of India. But she writes in English. Right? So to understand their use of language, and supposing you wish to translate that, right? Which means that an Indian mind is expressing itself into English, and you have to retranslate it into Indian expression. So that again becomes a very interesting challenge, I should say. We did discuss that about passion, and finally, I think I did communicate. Now, at this moment, I don't exactly remember what word we chose, but you agreed with it. So I think I'm sure that if because it needs to be done. You know, these Eastern languages like Arabic, Persian, Urdu, Hindi, Bengali, all of them need to be translated into Western languages also, so that people begin to appreciate the aesthetics of each other. People are mixing together. You see so many Bengalis in the streets in New York. If you also knew their poetry, perhaps you would look at them very differently. You would see them as somebody different, right? It is possible that you begin to see them. We may begin to see each other differently if we understand each other's poetry. So this needs to be done, really, and it's not impossible. But I think that if one works with the author, if the two work together, then some very good results can be achieved.
I think that's a very beautiful note on which to end this really nice evening with all of you. First of all, a big round of applause.